I've been thinking a lot recently about how we evaluate and measure risk, how we fear what we fear, and how we move through that fear, how it paralyzes us, how it motivates us, and how we learn from it and put risk into proper perspective so we're able to live a richer and, to link this to last month's topic, more courageous life. Risk is largely a subjective and relative matter. When we face adversity, the way we've learned to evaluate and respond to our perception of risk is essential to our response to any adverse event.
Kick-ass coach. Kick-ass coach.
Hi there, my name is Roxanne Bartel. Most people call me Rox. I've been doing this podcast now for more than 5 years. While I work with executive teams and leaders, a few years back I realized a passion for also working with young professionals in their 30s and 40s who want to accelerate their career progress in a meaningful way. You can learn more about me and my focus on my website at impactbank.ca, impactbank.ca. My podcast and weekly newsletter and blog posts are reflections of my executive experience and insights about life, leadership, and performing with excellence. 2 quotes best sum up my purpose and intention. First, from one of my very favorite theoretical physicists, and I have a few, but this one is Max Planck. He says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And the second, from an educational theorist and philosopher, John Dewey, who said, education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. We do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. I hope my experiences and insights serve to inspire reflection and meaningful insights within you. And I hope for you that, like me, you'll seek to practice self-compassion even as you embark on becoming a better, perhaps happier, and more self-aware version of yourself. Now, on with today's episode. As a performance consultant, I built a team of data analysts, and I learned so much from them as I utilized their skills for collecting and assessing the messages and lessons from a variety of indicators. I learned how to look at risk or assess risk differently. In the 80s, I started my career in business in the financial sector, in securities specifically. It was before the huge shift to data the way we use it now, but at a time when the risk taker was revered. That, in my opinion, is the reason we experienced such a volatile financial decade of decadence in the 80s. The financial crisis of the aughts was the hangover, I suspect, of believing data now allowed us to rise above that volatility that we experienced in the 80s. We continue, though, to struggle with our relationship with assessing risk or understanding risk. By thinking we have figured it out, we actually allow it to bring us down again, both collectively and individually, it turns out. Now, in the midst of a pandemic, something we predicted but failed to prepare for, And even with the forecasting and modeling around this pandemic, we're demonstrating incredibly poor, short sighted political decisions. It's actually stunning. It's stunning to see our collective and individual incompetence in measuring, weighing, and responding to risks, whether perceived or real and measured. We could look at the strange responses by governments in their attempts to create and deploy meaningful public policy and to people's inability to comprehend the scientific responses and their own options along the way in response to them. I have been most intrigued recently by the way risk aversion is related to our inability to recognize and weigh risks, particularly as it relates to vaccines. It is frankly fascinating and horrifying at some level to watch and observe how humans are so bloody irrational. Take, for example, the AstraZeneca vaccine. It's been shown that about 1 in 250,000 shares a relationship to a blood clot. Although we have no evidence of the direct cause and effect, it's 1 in a quarter million have reported with an adverse event in the form of this serious blood clotting. The Janssen vaccine in the US has less than a 1 in a million indirect relationship with blood clots, and yet both have been put on pause and limited. And thank goodness in most countries, not all, there's we're getting a little bit clearer on understanding this risk and not blocking it completely. There are so many more, much higher risks of adverse events associated with everyday choices each one of us is making each and every day of our life. But we don't give those decisions a second thought. I took a Tylenol this morning. I put butter on my bagel too. I walked across the street to pick up my prescription. I climbed a ladder to change a ceiling mounted light. All of these choices carry a higher risk than either of these vaccines. In addition, as Dr. Sharma from Health Canada recently reminded us just last week, there is a 1/1000th of a percent risk in getting the clots because of the vaccine, while there is a 20% risk of the same clots or worse happening if one contracts COVID-19. Like, how in the world can we not see the difference between those two things? I shake my head, and it's so irrational. We are irrational. Adverse events make us even more irrational. I heard this morning on CBC them talking about how one of the doctors explained it with, this is new, and when something is new, we tend to see the risk more commonly. Well, I'm not sure that's entirely true. And using a lot of things on social media without having quantified the risks associated. So I'm not sure it's the newness of it. I think there's something else involved. But what can we do about it? First, we need to accept that it's true. We are irrational beings. We need to just realize it, accept it to be true. And secondly, establish standards and practices to avoid letting our irrational fear keep us from making good decisions. It's not easy. It requires discipline. And then build this discipline into a habitual approach to lessen your risk of making irrational decisions. Finally, never squander an opportunity to look and learn from hindsight because it is true, hindsight is often 2020, and there's so much evidence we all have in our own life. We don't even need to go into broader lessons of learning in hindsight, where we can find irrational decisions we've made and review them to help us make better decisions. Try it. We'll make better decisions in the future if we just honestly accept we made a bad one. And yes, we have a lot of people feel shame for having made them, but if we can assess how we did that and why we did that, we are less. We've got to do one more thing in between there. We've got to figure out how we can prompt ourselves to think differently in future similar kinds of situations. That's the trick. And I'm going to talk more about that in my newsletter on Wednesday. But this is the question I invite you to join me in reflecting on this week. How have I reacted in the past to risks associated with potential adverse events? And what does this reaction say about me? And what are the related lessons I can take from it? Walk with me, and we'll explore how to nurture a healthy approach to processing adversity, the capacity to turn every challenge into growth for the career and life you love. Walk with me this year. I would love to share the journey with you. Check out links in the show notes for opportunities to walk together. I'm Rox Bartel. Until next time, bonne journée.